Welcome to the webisode on the virtues as foundations of the vowed life, or in your lay context, the life according to the evangelical counsels. The vowed life, or the life according to the evangelical counsels, may be likened to a penthouse. A penthouse, in his letter to the Philippians, Paul writes, and I quote, Philippians chapter 4, verse 8, "Finally, beloved, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is pleasing, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, and if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things." And I would add, not only think about these things, but do these things. So, Paul is talking about a virtuous life in terms of what is true, honorable, just, pleasing, commendable, respectable, etc. Now, how does a virtue come about? A virtue is born out of the repetition of a good act. So a good act repeated time and again and again. This good act becomes a good habit. And the good habit, when it is deeply entrenched inside oneself, becomes a power, virtus. The Latin word for power is virtus, virtus. In Spanish it is called virtus. And even in the vernacular, the Ilocos is virtud. Which enables one not only to choose the good in concrete actions with ease, facility, and promptness, but it also gives the best of himself with all the sensory and spiritual powers. So that's a virtue. So let's take a good act. I tell the truth. One tells the truth. The next time he tells the truth again. He does not want to tell a lie. And the next time he tells the truth again. He does not want to tell a lie. And on and on and on and on. And this telling the truth becomes now a habit, a good habit. And when that good habit is deeply entrenched in oneself, then it gives one ease, facility, and promptness in telling the truth. And not only that, it enables the person to give the best of himself with all his sensory and spiritual powers. So that's a virtue. The goal of the virtuous life, says Saint Gregory of Nyssa, is to become like God. To become like God. Or in the Greek culture is divinization, is deification. A virtuous life is made up of human virtues as well as divine virtues or theological virtues. Now let's take a look at the human virtues. What are human virtues? Human virtues are firm attitudes, stable dispositions inside, and habitual perfections of the intellect and will. Habitual perfections of the intellect and will. And their work is to govern our actions, to order our passions, and to guide our conduct according to the norms of reason and faith. Their fruit or outcome is ease, facility, promptness, and self-mastery, and joy in freely practicing the morally good. The overall fruit of a virtuous life is a morally good life. Morally good life. These virtues, these powers, lead us to living a morally good life are called moral virtues, moral powers. And the moral virtues, the moral powers are acquired by human effort. A morally good act is repeated again and again, consistently and repeatedly, and constantly in private as well as in public. After some time, the firm attitude and stable dispositions are formed. Now, there are 4 moral virtues around which all the other virtues revolve. Because of their pivotal role, they serve as hinges. The Latin word is cardines. Cardo in Latin, the singular is hinge, the hinge of a door, and since there are 4, they are called cardines. So hence the word cardinal virtues, or hinge virtues. And they are prudence, justice, temperance, and fortitude. Now let's listen to the Book of Wisdom. It's in chapter 8, verse 7. And I quote, "And if anyone loves righteousness, her labors are virtuous, for she teaches self-control, temperance, and prudence, justice, and courage. Nothing in life is more profitable for mortals than this." It's chapter 8, verse 7. And the sequence of the cardinal virtues in the Catechism of the Catholic Church is this. First, you have prudence, justice, then fortitude and temperance. That's the sequence of the enumeration of these cardinal virtues, moral virtues in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. Let's take a look at them one by one. Prudence. Prudence, according to Thomas Aquinas, is right reason in action. His Latin is recta ratio agibilium. Right reason in action. There is reason or intellect. So the reason or the intellect is at work in prudence. And so, but the reason must be right reason, not wrong or erroneous reason. Right reason discerns what is morally good and in every circumstance. Then right reason chooses the right means of achieving or obtaining the morally good. Therefore, prudence, right reason, discerns the good. Discerns the good. Then, after the discernment, chooses the good that is discerned and chooses the means to attain the good. And after the discernment and choice, guides the judgment of conscience. So that's prudence. With the assistance of prudence, we can apply general principles to particular situations or circumstances without fear of error, even without doubt about the good to achieve and the evil to be avoided. Prudence is an intellectual power, an intellectual virtue. Then next, justice. Well, for quite some time in the church, this has been a favorite theme. Justice. Justice is a volitional power. It belongs to the will. While prudence is an intellectual power. It belongs to the intellect or the right reason. Justice is the power of the will to give God what is due to Him and to give to others what is due to them. It is a constant, consistent, and suitable firmness of the will to give to others what is due to them. Justice towards God is the virtue of religion. Justice towards neighbor becomes commutative justice, commute, when it attends to the rights and duties of individual persons among themselves. So therefore it's a one-on-one relationship. So I buy some good from you, say medicine, for so much, and I pay you, and you give me the right medicine. Since I paid for a branded medicine, you give me a branded medicine, not a generic medicine. Now, justice can also be distribute, meaning enables a person in charge of the distribution of goods or benefits in a community to distribute them according to proper proportions and in accord with the dignity, merits, and deeds of each one. Now, during this COVID-19 quarantine and lockdown period, or there have been distributed goods to people, how many kilos of rice, how many cans of sardines, how many packs of noodles, etc. And even money is distributed to senior citizens. But if the distribution is not done rightly and properly according to needs, then it becomes injustice. So the distributive justice becomes injustice. Now there is also social justice. What does this mean? Oh, we have heard many times about the social justice, especially in the Philippine setting. Social justice is sometimes called legal justice. Impels members of the community or society, to render to that community or society what is needed in regard to the common good or the goal of society. So social justice is geared towards the common good, to the good of the community. And we are obliged to give our share and our part in the acquisition, in the attainment of the common good of the community. So that's justice. It's a moral virtue, but it belongs to the will. Therefore, it is a volitional power. Well, let's take fortitude or courage. Fortitude is the power of control. Control of what? Control of fear in the face of an impending evil. Before I came for this presentation, I received a text from a lady from Baguio, and she told me, I am here waiting for my turn for consultation at the Notre Dame Hospital because I have dry cough. And I'm very nervous now and very afraid it might be COVID-19. I'm very nervous and very afraid now. What if I am infected by COVID-19? Apo, please pray for me. I'm so nervous now and so afraid. And I texted back, yes, prayers assured. Take courage and trust in the Lord. So, fortitude is the power of control, the control of fear in the face of an impending, an evil that is coming, that is getting nearer and nearer. But fortitude is also the control of daring from attacking an impending evil. So here is an evil that is about to come or is coming, the daring, see, in attacking the impending evil. Fortitude controls that too. In life, there are undoubtedly countless obstacles, difficulties, and trials to be handled. Countless. And we need fortitude to attack and conquer them. Again, before I came for this faith education, I received a text message from another lady saying that let's not fear in the face of whatever COVID-19 might bring to us. And I texted back this lady. Refuse to be defeated is one of my life principles. And it stems from the virtue of fortitude. And when evil cannot be conquered, we need endurance to suffer the evil with a tranquil and strong spirit. Tranquil but strong spirit. So that's fortitude. And the last one, according to the enumeration of the Catechism of the Catholic Church, is temperance. As a habit, temperance moderates the proclivity to sense pleasure, especially the pleasure which arises from the sense of taste and touch. Taste and touch. There are two integral components of temperance. And the first is the sense of shame. For us Filipinos, hiya. And the power of honor. Remember the Spanish palabra de honor, word of honor. These two, the sense of shame, hiya, and sense of honor, palabra de honor, have to do with what is base and ugly, to be abhorred. So these are the moral virtues. As I said in the beginning, they have to do with our moral life. They direct our moral life. That's why they're called moral virtues. And as St. Gregory of Nyssa said, a morally virtuous life is a life that is God-like. It leads us to become like God. Now let's move on to the divine powers, divine virtues. And they are called theological virtues. Theological because they lead us to God. They have to have something to do with our relationship with God. The moral virtues, well, they concern about ourselves, about our deeds, about our actions, and about our moral life. These divine virtues, these powers, relate directly to God. And they dispose the baptized to live in a relationship with the triune God. And these divine virtues or divine powers are infused by God into the soul of the baptized. So they're infused. they're given freely to the soul, to the intellect, and to the will at baptism. We do not have to acquire them, repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat until they become habitual. And then when they have become habitual, they give us ease, promptness, and facility to do what is good and to avoid what's evil. No, but the theological divine virtues are infused during the day of our baptism and empower us to live as children of God. These powers give life to the moral virtues. They give life to justice, to prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance. And there are three of these powers: faith, hope, and charity. If you recall, during the pontificate of Benedict XVI, these three theological virtues, divine powers, constituted the thrust of the pontificate of Benedict XVI. So, first, what is faith? It is a supernatural power. It's a power over and beyond our natural capacity. It's a supernatural power by which we believe God, by which we believe what God reveals to be the truth. And the motive for believing does not rest on the intrinsic truth of what is believed as obvious or clear under the investigation of reason, of the intellect of the mind, but rather on the authority of the revealing God. So that's faith. I believe because God revealed it so, said it so. And it's not on the power of my mind to investigate and to make conclusions and so on about this civil truths. Now, although faith is infused by God, is a gift infused by God during baptism, the person to whom this gift is given, in whom this power, this virtue is infused, must make an act of faith. That is to say, the person must submit to God with an assent that is reasoned and free, aided by the movement of divine grace. So therefore, the act of faith is the work of reason, but it is aided by divine grace. The perfect operation of the power of faith, the virtue of faith, requires the state of sanctifying grace and the actuation of charity. Well, there was a friend years back who came to interview me because he was writing the sort of autobiography of a big political figure. And I said, was the last one whom she interviewed, and I said, I refuse to be interviewed. maybe whatever you will hear from me, you must have heard it already from other people. And then she asked, why? This figure I've learned from my many interviews is this and that and this and that. He did this good and that good, and he liberated people and so on and so forth. So she was enumerating a litany of the good deeds done by this person. And I said, now look, no amount of deeds, good deeds, that we do, unless we are in the state of sanctifying grace and the actuation of charity, no amount of this will be valuable to God, even if they are done with faith. Now, the virtue of faith, the power of faith is our direct line to God. I remember during the OIC regime of the first years of the presidency of Cory Aquino. I remember the governors and the vice governors and so on, and the mayors, they were appointed by Cory Aquino, and these are called the OICs. And there were OIC appointees in the provincial government of Ilocos Sur. But then the reigning powers then blockaded the entry of these appointed OICs. So they blockaded the Gubentus Dike, the way through to get to the provincial capital. And there was a barricade for almost 2 months. And I was afraid that something worse might happen. So I suggested to the higher officials of the Church of Ilocos Sur, Nueva Segovia, that something should be done. And they asked me what? Well, send some representatives of the clergy to the guest house in Malacanang and to talk to President Cory Aquino about the situation. Because if the OIC appointees are insisted on, there might be something bloody that will happen in Ilocos Sur. And then we will be back to the old days when we were the #1 violent province throughout the whole country. So the Archdiocese decided to send 3 priests, and I was one of them. And the other 2 priests told me, oh, how can we get into the guest house? They do not know us. And then I suggested, we'll use some intermediaries. Who? Cardinal Sin. I said, but does Cardinal Sin know us? Well, I suppose he still remembers me. I met him in Iloilo when I went to the Trappist in Guimaras. He was the Archbishop of Haro before he was appointed Archbishop of Manila. And I know Cardinal Sin has a very photographic memory. I suppose he must still remember me. And so we went, and I wore this habit that I'm wearing now. Oh, it was so difficult to get an appointment to see the president. You have to pass through 3 checkpoints. If you pass the first, then there is a second one. And if you pass the second one, you will have to be interviewed again by the third. And if you pass the third, then the appointment goes. So our appointment was June 13. We could not make it on a June 12 because the cardinal or the president was at the Rizal Park for the celebration of the Independence Day. And so Cardinal Sin assured us that, okay, I'll take care of the appointment. So on that afternoon of June 12, we were at the audience hall of Cardinal Sin. And when he came out, it's a very dramatic entrance in the audience hall of the Cardinal. There is a small kind of reception with a stage. And when the Cardinal comes out, the curtain of the stage opens, and he comes out with his cardinal red cassock. And then when he saw me with my habit, this habit on, and then he said, "Oh, Father Rabang," and he came to embrace me. And so I told the other two priests, companions, you see. And then we sat down and said, "Oh, by all means, you must see the president. I received the letter of your bishop, and you must see the president by all means." So he called for his secretary, dial guest house Malacanang. So the secretary dialed, and immediately the answer, guest house, office of the president, good afternoon. Cardinal Sin on the line, Cory Aquino, please. So it was a direct line. It went immediately to the president. So faith is our direct line to God. But in order for that infused theological or divine power of faith infused in our soul at baptism, we must make acts of faith again and again. And the motive for making those acts of faith is not because the truth, the revealed truth, or whatever God has revealed, is not because we see it clearly in our intellect, in our minds, in the investigation of the mind, but because God said it so. And I believe, and now I make an act of faith. Okay. I hope you get some deeper insights into what this faith is all about. The other divine power that was infused, the act of faith, the divine virtue, power of faith is infused in the intellect. And there is another divine power, divine virtue or theological virtue infused in our will. It is, like faith, a supernatural power. It goes over and beyond our natural capacity. It is hope. With this divine power, namely hope, we desire God and His kingdom. We desire God and His kingdom. We desire God and eternal life as our happiness. And as we desire God, as we desire eternal life as our happiness, we cannot rely on our own strength, on our own powers, on our own capacity, but only on the help of the grace of the Holy Spirit in the attainment of God, in the attainment of this happiness, this beatitude, in the attainment of eternal life. The power of hope keeps us from discouragement. And it sustains us in times of abandonment. It buoys up our spirit in expectation of that eternal happiness we are desiring. And above all, it makes us persevere to the end and to obtain God's eternal reward for the good works accomplished with the grace of God. So that's hope. If you recall, Benedict XVI wrote an encyclical letter about this. Spes salvi, saved by hope. His first encyclical was Deus Caritas Est. God is love, and it's about faith. Now the third divine power or theological virtue infused into our soul on the day of our baptism is charity. And this power is infused into the will, our will. Through this power, we love God for His own sake above all else. Well, a friend texted me the other day, oh, there's so many people now praying to God because of this pandemic, COVID-19. But I wonder if they will be praying after this, or they have been praying to God for His own sake, to love God for His own sake, without COVID-19. So the power of charity enables us to love God for His own sake above all else, and also empowers us to love others and ourselves rightly for the sake of God, not for any other sake. Now, what are the indications of a life lived in charity? To check whether you are living your life in charity, the first indicator is union with God is first and foremost. Union with God. And this union with God is manifested by constantly living in the presence of God. In the presence of God. And living in the presence of God is marked by recollection, in which we practice prayer. It's not marked by, distractions, project here, project there, action here, action there. But it's marked by recollection, in which the practice of prayer is done. And habitual prayer is the language of that union with God. You will recall I explained habitual prayer in one of my webisodes when we were talking about praying incessantly, praying all the time and everywhere. From prayer as union with God, the sense of mission is evoked. The sense of mission or ministry will flow as also a sign of a life lived in charity. Now, what I am doing now in this daily webisode, Faith Education, from 10 to 11. This is a mission, but it flows from my sense of union with God. So whatever we do as a kind of a mission, it should not be just the movement of our legs and our hands and our mouth and of our intellect, but it should flow, it should be an overflow of that living union with God. So those are the three indicators of a life lived in charity. Union with God, which is manifested by constantly living in the presence of God, and constantly living in the presence of God gives way to habitual prayer, and from prayer understood as union with God, living in the presence of God in the state of in habit of prayer, then what I do, my mission flows. Can't you see that our life then is so beautiful, so wonderful? God has given us powers, faith, hope, and charity that infuse. But we have to make acts of faith, acts of hope, and acts of love. And to govern our life, especially the moral dimension of our lives. God's grace impels us to attain, by constant practice, to attain powers like prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance. Now, on these virtues, the cardinal virtues of prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance, and on the basis of the three theological powers, divine powers God gave us, the penthouse is built, which is the foundation of the vowed life, or the life according to the evangelical counsels in your own situation as lay people. The vowed life, or the life lived in accordance with the evangelical counsels, rests on the foundation or base of human virtues, especially the cardinal virtues of prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance, and on the divine virtues, theological virtues, faith, hope, and charity. Now, poverty, chastity, obedience, out of which a person makes vows, and the living of the evangelical counsels in your context as lay people. This cannot stand without the foundation, the bigger building, foundational building on which devout life or the life of the evangelical counsel rests. Without the basis of human and divine virtue to rest on, the vowed life, the evangelical counsel, will not make sense, much less will they endure to the end. Now, what are the challenges of these virtues then today? While when a believer who live a saintly life, is on the process of being raised to the altar of saints in the Catholic Church, his life of heroic virtues, heroic, is investigated. To be declared a saint of the Catholic Church is to have lived a life of heroic virtues while he or she was living on earth. While we have one Ilocano candidate, Bishop Alfredo Florentin Versosa. It was my privilege to act as the advocatus diaboli, the devil's advocate, during the diocesan process held in Nueva Segovia. And what we investigated was his heroic life of virtues. Oh, very heroic, especially his obedience. He was then the Bishop of Lipa, and he was told by Rome to resign without giving any reason whatsoever for that forced resignation. And without much ado, without any complaint, he packed his things and went home to Vigan. And while he was living in Vigan under the care of his sisters, he did not even have any money, because all the money he had accrued as Bishop of Lipa, he spent them all for the good of the diocese. And things like those. Heroic virtues. Now, for most of us, our lot will not be to be canonized saints of the Catholic Church. For most of us, just the same as disciples of Jesus, as members of the community of disciples, we will have to live a life of virtues. Not possibly the heroic virtues on the heroic level, but on the level of plain virtues. We have to start to live out the human virtues, especially the cardinal virtues of prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance. And from there we move on to the plane of the divine virtues, the theological virtues of faith, hope, and charity. And finally, we will have to take into account the living out of these virtues required by our own particular state of life. In short, what I am trying to get across to you in this way